Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us today an acclaimed author, speaker, and a management consultant. He has worked at Hughes Software Systems as VP HR, Corporate Planning and Corporate Communications. His book titled Inside C-Suite, endorsed by Anand Mahindra no less and published by HarperCollins, is a bestseller. He has worked at C-levels in different functions across global organizations. Currently, he is an independent director on the board of Jindal Stainless Limited and Concord Biotech Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, we have amongst us Jayaram Easwaran. Jayaram, how are you feeling today and how's it going?
Hi Prashant, I'm feeling great. In fact, I'm taking this call from London. That's why you see me wearing something warm. And thank you very much for having me on this podcast. And I have, unlike many, I have worked in different organizations, brick and mortar and technology. So what I plan to focus on really is share some of my experiences and what are the insights that I derived from that. Tendency at this age is to be very prescriptive. So if I tend to be prescriptive, you please keep me honest, okay? I don't want to do that.
Awesome. So, Jayaram, it is said that the Battle of Waterloo was actually won on the playgrounds of Eton. Do you have some early memories of your school and college in Pune which helped shape your subsequent career?
Well, that's a lovely quotation. In fact, I use that so many times whenever I speak in major forums. I studied, I'm an army man's son, and I studied in a Jesuit school called St. Vincent's, and I think we got some of the finest education there. When I try and throw my mind back, I recollect one of the fathers there when he was talking to us in a class. He told us that, listen, all of you had a very good shake of the dice. That's why you are in the school, and you're all English speaking people because English is such an important passport to growth in India. And then I remember him telling us very specifically, whenever you throw some litter and you throw the litter on the school grounds or anywhere else, remember there is somebody else who's employed by us who has to bend down and pick it up. Have consideration for those people. Just because you had a better shake of the dice does not mean that you got to create work for others. That I think was quite a, enlightening thing that I realized, that you need to be sensitive to people who are lower than you or smaller than you. But this introspection happened later, but this is something that I picked up in the school.
Excellent. You later went to IIM Bangalore. Tell us what made you decide to go for IIM? How did you prepare for it? And how was your experience at IIM Bangalore? And after all these years, do you think that having an IIM badge is really useful for one's career?
Before that, let me just allude to another experience when I was a kid. I think that's important for all of us to know. The experience happened then, but the epiphany moment happened very much later in the corporate world. See, my dad was in the army, and in those days, being an army man's kid, all that you knew was the cantonment life, and the only ambition you had was to become an army officer. I applied for the National Defense Academy, which is the route to joining the army, and I was rejected because of weak eyesight. And just imagine, a young kid whose aspirations were only to be an army person suddenly getting rejected because of weak eyesight. And I was actually devastated. I remember that later on in life, when I was in the corporate world, sometimes I would suffer by comparison because sometimes somebody else gets promoted before you, you get promoted before somebody. So we all suffer by comparison. And it was then that I had this particular epiphany moment saying that, listen, when you got rejected for the army, you accepted your physical disabilities, and you tempered your aspirations accordingly. I never aspired for the defense forces after that. I had to find an alternate career. Now everybody is not cut the same way. Everybody doesn't have the same capabilities. Some will grow to become CEOs, some will become function heads. So why don't you also accept your own limitations when it comes to capabilities? And I think it was so important for me because then later on in life, when we had children, we never put any pressure on them. We let them, flower the way they wanted. This is such an important insight, which I think a lot of us need to have. Otherwise, we put pressure on ourselves and our near and dear ones.
Right? And now to the IIM Bangalore story.
You see, before I joined the IIM, I joined the DCM group. And in those days, DCM was amongst the best jobs. And I joined them in a small town called Kota. They had a 500-acre, chemicals and fertilizers factory. I had never heard of IIM. Like I told you, army was the only thing I knew. But in DCM, we had hired a lot of IIT people. And in the hostel, because we were in the hostel for 2 years with everybody else, I was there. These guys were sitting and just practicing something called the GMAT or the ATGSB. And I was wondering, what are you guys doing? And they spoke to me about IIM. That is the first time I heard of the IIM. And when I tried to figure this out a little more, I realized that the IIM was something which was a passport to a great corporate career. Even guys who had done IIT, the cream of the cream as far as engineering was concerned, were also obsessed with something called IIM. So I said, I also need to be obsessed. So I got those books and I kept practicing and I made the cut to IIM Bangalore. I have been thinking about this particular question of yours, and I think the IIM, getting into the IIM is all muscle memory, as they say in golf. The more you practice, the more are your chances of cracking the examination. And I have this particular view about the IIMs that IIM is nothing but a rubber stamp. It gives you a highly polished, sophisticated rubber stamp, and that's the only reason why I did IIM. And to me, it's like a Bombay suburban train. In Bombay, those of us who are aware of Bombay, when the train arrives on the platform, you go and stand in front of the door. When it opens, the crowd will take you in. Stand on the side, and when your destination comes, just stand in front of the door, the crowd will take you out. So the IIMs really are a huge catchment for companies to come and pick up people. Of course, there's a lot of learning that happens, but most of it happens, in the hostels and elsewhere when you have your own discussions and a view of the world changes. And I think the IIMs are a very good stamp to have. But if you don't have it, that's not the end, because I have seen people from other MBA institutions also do very well in life. So the most important thing to understand with IIMs is it's like, the children of film stars. They'll get their break, but if they have to keep running, as they say, lambi race ka ghoda, then you have to have something within yourself. And I think in IIM also, the initial branding helps you get a job. But what IIMs don't teach you, which I've written in my book, I have alluded to this movie called Color of Money, 1986 movie in which Paul Newman and uh, this guy, Tom Cruise, both of them are acting. And they're all, the hustlers on the pool table. That's where they make the money. And Tom Cruise is a loose cannon, shows off his skills as he enters the pool room, and nobody really bets against him because his talent has been exposed. Paul Newman, a veteran, he then tells Tom Cruise that, kid, you will never make it big here because you don't understand the people moves. And I think that is what a lot of us in the corporate world, and we will talk about it as we progress. If you don't understand the people moves, the motivations, and the fears that your colleagues and others have in the organization, you don't deal with that, um, it's not going to be helping you. Then IIM is just like anything else. This is my view on IIM.
So I'm sure all the viewers are waiting with a bated breath to hear more on that point about how do you navigate in the corporate world. But post IIM Bangalore, you joined the Aisha Group in 1980, where you grew across functions and finally became the head of corporate marketing. I can see where some of your stories came from in a famous book, Inside C-Suite, but more about that later. And then in 1990, you joined Madhyam Advertising as a CEO and joint managing director. You worked there for a decade, all the way till 2000. Please regale us with how that switch happened and some of the stories from those glorious years of the 90s when India was shifting it into the new economy with the reforms.
Well, I think a lot of kids today, the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys and the Gen Xs, most of them are not really aware. In those days, there was no internet. The cell phone wasn't there, and we had to actually make our way through a world without all these things. And I must mention something about Aisha before I get down to my days at Madhyam. Aisha was amongst the finest organizations to work for. And a lot of what I learned at Aisha, I have applied in organizations where I had any kind of influence. And in Madhyam, I had a lot of influence because I was the CEO and the joint MD. I joined Aisha because one of the agencies that were working for me, I had a huge portfolio in Aisha as head of corporate marketing, but two of them were, for tractors, I had one agency called Madhyam, and for trucks, I had an agency called FCB Ulka. Madhyam is a small agency, so the owner and MD once told me, Jayaram, why don't you come over and help me grow this organization and let's make it something like Aisha. And I said, Chalo, let me try and do something. How long can I continue to rule the roost because I have a fancy designation in a fancy company? Let me go out and test myself. And when you are heading a company which has no brand name of its own, we had no cash credit limits, and you're trying to struggle, and a few people have put their future with you. Life can be extremely challenging, but possibly the best years of one's life. I remember my father-in-law, when he got to know that I'm leaving a huge company like Aisha and joining a so-called two-bit advertising agency, which is not known. I remember he told my wife privately, which I overheard. He says, "Where is this guy going? The advertising agencies don't even own the table and chair which they have. All these kids do is they blow smoke rings, pick up ideas from the smoke rings, and try and sell it to clients." So that was the feeling in those days. Madhyam was extremely challenging, and I can hopefully talk of regale our audience with just one or two, uh, you know, episodes of what one had to do, because marta kya nahi karta, as they say in Hindi. I remember I used to go for events in order to network and let people know that we were also around. And one particular event I went for, and at the tea break, I met one very senior executive whom I was trying to contact, but the secretary would never let me go through. And then I gave him my visiting card. He looked at it and he said, "Oh, you guys are a matrimonial agency from Madhya Pradesh." That was what he had thought I was. So I told him, "No, no, no, we are an advertising agency, and I'd like to meet you sometime. Can you give me your card?" He patted himself in all his pockets and said, "Oh my God, I've run out of cards." And then he walked away from me. And then I saw him give his card to somebody else. So obviously the learning was that, if you are not of any use to anybody else, they're not going to waste your time with you. So I walked up to him and I said, "Excuse me, sir, I think I gave you my wrong card." He said, "What happened?" I said, "This is my card." And I had three cards with me. One card was Jayaram Insurance CEO Madhyam. The other was Jayaram Insurance Madhyam. And the third one was, I got my art director to draw me with that sword in my hand with He-Man, Master of the Universe. So one side was Jayaram, photograph with He-Man, Master of the Universe. And the reverse side were my details. I gave him that card. He says, "Really?" I said, "Yes, because this is the card I give to people when they don't think it then worthy enough to give me a card of theirs." He gave me a sheepish grin, pulled out a card and gave me. And then for about 2 minutes, he spoke to me about He-Man and the purpose of this card. And then I told him, "Listen, sir, I'm going to give you a call tomorrow. Are you in the office?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I'll call you and tell your secretary that this is He-Man, Master of the Universe speaking. Please ask him or her to put my call through." And he said, "Sure." Next day I call went through, met him, and bagged a small part of his very large account. So that is what taught me about differentiation. You need to differentiate yourself too in the marketplace if you want people to turn around and look at you. That was one great experience. But the other experience was, this is something useful for startups really. Today, a lot of people are having startups. Ability, forget about attracting business, that itself was a big struggle. But attracting talent. How do you get people who have terrific experience in larger brand name organizations to come and join you? What do you do? So I remember in my office, when I walked into my office, within a few minutes, the telephone rang. We had no cell phones in those days. So I picked up the phone and it was a lady on the other side saying, May I know who's speaking? So I said, listen, you made this call, you tell me who was speaking. So she said, listen, actually, I am calling from a search firm. We have been engaged by a US large advertising agency to hire people from two agencies in India. She named my agency and another agency. Obviously, she was desperate for people. She said, so I just want to speak to a few people. I said, listen, I'm just passing by, but take down the names. I gave her the names of my top 7 or 8 people: art director, creative director, account director. And I told her, these are the extension numbers of there. I call them up. 4 or 5 days later, she called me and said, you are Jayaram Easwaran, you are the CEO of the company. I said, yes, I am. She found through the reception. She said, why did you give me the names of all the people, of your own best people? You don't want them. I said, no, I want them desperately. But what happened? She said, I spoke to each one of them, offered them, in some cases, double their salary, and they said, not interested. So what exactly are you doing there, Jayaram? I said, I'm doing a lot of things, but thank you very much. You've indicated mine. And that's when, because I always believe that we value our jobs in two parts. It's not just the money. If I play the money game, I can never beat other organizations as an employer. You must have a culture. You must be offering something to the kids, and you must offer a decent amount of money, which helps them get by these, with a certain amount of surpluses. That is what we did at Madhyam. And we got some of the best talent, because for me, I needed to attract people for whom both aspects of the job mattered: the culture, the dignity, the opportunity to learn, opportunity to grow, and also money. And I think if startups can also start doing this kind of a thing initially, it'll help. Because if you're just going to hire people on money, you're getting into a never-ending rat race. That was my Madhyam, 2 episodes from my Madhyam days.
Awesome. So, after your wonderful run at Madhyam Advertising, you made what sounds to an outside viewer as an inexplicable change. You joined Tality India Services, which was the subsidiary of the very reputed chip design company called Cadence Incorporated USA. But you joined there as a director HR. Did it not feel like a downgrade or a demotion after being the CEO and joint managing director at Madhyam Advertising? Or was the paycheck too good to let it pass, even at the cost of taking a hit at the parties, introducing now yourself as the director HR instead of the CEO?
Well, Prashant, those were the days where there were 20 or 22 large international advertising agencies which had come into the country. Post liberalization, they were allowed to acquire agencies. So 93 to 94% of the organized advertising business was in the hands of some of these 20, 22 agencies. It was becoming difficult for mid-sized or small-sized agencies like us to really do well. That's the time we decided to part and sell the company to a very large organization. So here I was. We sold the agency, made a little money, had to find something. So my classmate from IIM, who was in the Silicon Valley, he got to know that this company was looking to start a 15th design center in India, and they normally start with an HR guy. And that is where I got hired. And that's the reason why I left Madhyam and I joined Tality. And Tality was in the Noida export promotion zone, 55 kilometers from my house in Gurgaon, one way. But you need a job. But what was very fascinating about Tality was it enabled me to travel every 2 months to some part of the world, in the Western world, for an offsite. But those days we were earning $300 per person per hour. This was 2001, 2002, you can imagine. And I'm sure, technology companies like Infosys and Hughes were earning possibly in some lower mid double digits per person, whatever it is. So it was a very heady business, and we were 15 centers globally, and we were doing extremely well. So that was Tality for you. And post 9/11, this was my first technology job, mind you. Before that, I had worked in brick and mortar companies. And when you get into a technology job, it was alien to me. Even the words being used when I used to go for offsites or even for meetings to the US, they use words like, let's shoot the breeze, keep me honest, so it took me some time to figure out what these words meant. And then that's the time I got inducted into the technology space. But post 9/11, our parent company was Cadence, and we were a pre-IPO company. And Cadence's businesses suffered because post 9/11 clients started pulling back, and hence they closed all 15 centers, design centers all over the world. And in India, we were also, shut, and I got laid off. And I was not young at that time. My son was in the 10th standard, and my daughter was in the 5th standard. And here I would like to pause a moment and share something which was so, so important in my own experience and my learning and my ability to cope with life. I realized that, life swings between the immutable laws of tears and joy. Everybody has their own equal share. And getting laid off in India, invariably what happens is that you start looking at it as affecting your self-worth. You start feeling that you are useless. That's why you got laid off. So I went into a shell initially. It's only later on that I realized that it is the businesses that didn't do well, and hence they chose to lay me off. And it took me some time, but then I wrote about this. I said, never make a layoff, because also India was also, there were layoffs happening all over. We've seen that happening. And a lot of young kids I used to talk to were quite frustrated. They let it affect their self-worth. So I wrote about this saying, listen, first of all, never make the mistake of allowing the layoff to affect your self-worth. It is not your fault. Secondly, the biggest mistake we make, because I was earning good money in those days, was that do not think that your last salary drawn is the bare minimum required for your survival. Because the moment we start thinking that, that is the time that we start wondering, how am I going to live? How am I going to exist without a job? It's a myth. The third thing was, you see, most important is we have a lot of goodwill in the marketplace. I've worked in so many places. There's so much of goodwill. So I came out of my shell and started, whenever I started attending parties, etc., I share, etc. And when people ask, what are you doing, Jayaram? I said, listen, I've been laid off. And that's the time people will say, so-and-so is looking for someone. Why don't you go there? And the mere fact that I was interviewing even for jobs which I was not interested, somehow boosted my confidence. And later on, the company, the search firm that had a mandate from Hughes for an HR head, they saw the news and I knew the guy. He saw the news in Economic Times that Tality shuts India Center, and he approached me, and I then went for the discussions at Hughes. So that's how I moved from Tality to Hughes. But I learned a lot my first foray into the IT space. But the learnings are so important. I hope people have caught it.
Right, and that brought us to the defining moment, perhaps not so much for you, but surely for the rest of us. You joined Hughes Software Systems HSS as VP Human Resources in the year 2002. Now, those were turbulent times, weren't they? HSS had been severely jolted by the dot-com bust. There had been salary cuts. People had been laid off in an unprecedented way for Hughes. The business was looking challenging and there was an acquisition brewing in the horizon. Why did you decide to join HSS in those turbulent times? Albeit, we know what happened at Tality. Wasn't it like putting your hand into the proverbial hornet's nest? Who got you really into HSS? Tell us very frankly about it all.
No, you see, you have to put your mind back to the scenario at that time. Here was a guy, kids studying in some of the best schools and being laid off. And jobs I didn't have too many offers. You don't get job offers just like that. And that's the time that this particular search firm, they heard about me, and the guy, the owner of that firm knew me. And then he called me and said, Jayaram, because for them also it's money, right? If they place me somewhere. They had a mandate. So he asked me. And so that's the time I went and met Arun Kumar first. I loved what I saw because he reminded me a lot about the owner of Aisha, very much in terms of the way he spoke and the way he came across about his values and about people and all those things. So I said, yes, I'm interested. But then I got a slight shock when he said, I'm not the deciding factor. I said, you're the MD. He said, no, your colleagues who are there here, you got to actually spend time with each one of them. And then we are going to collectively discuss, and then we'll decide whether we are the right fit for you or not. Very politely he said that. So that was the first learning for me, because I then spoke to my mentor in Aisha, and I said, listen, I have had a short stint in a technology company, but here is a big company, because HSS was reasonably big name. So he told me, Jayaram, when you are joining at senior levels, watch out for a few things. I said, like what? He said, you're going to have colleagues. And I also told him that I have to meet each one of them. And, they're going to collectively decide whether I'm acceptable or not. And I was desperate for the job because I had been laid off. So you can understand the conditions. So he told me, Jayaram, when we join a company at a senior level, and more so in the technology company, where a lot of your colleagues are going to be much younger than you, which was true. They were much younger than me. Arun was a little older than me. He says, remember, they are in the company not for charity. Each one of them is extremely ambitious, and your track record is pretty good. You've been a CEO, you've been a head of functions, you've worked with Aisha, etc., etc. Find out in your early discussions with them, or figure out what could be their own ambitions within that company, because you're not going to be taken you're not going to be approved by them just because you're very smart, you're going to contribute to the company. That is not their priority. Their priority is, this guy who is joining as our colleague, is he going to in any way derail my own aspirations within the company? And this is so important for people who are joining at senior levels. And then he said, figure that out and try and address that very early, and let them know in a very subtle way that you're not going to be affecting their aspirations. The second thing he told me was, remember, relationships in these companies are deep rooted at the key levels. So if these 4 or 5 people, if they've been together in the company for quite some time, their relationships are going to be very deep within themselves. And worse, if some of them have worked together in the previous organization, or they have studied together. And I thought this man was being, prophetic, because these things were true with the other people who were there in the company. He says, then breaking into that group is not going to be easy. You have to retain your individuality, because if you talk to one about the other, it's going to go to the others. So be careful, because the senior levels people fail to get into and to last in an organization because they don't understand the deep-rooted relationships that exist. So be cautious there. These are the 2 things he told me. In fact, the third thing he said was, and he was echoing my own words, which I use much later. He said, you need to understand the people moves. And when I asked Arun later on, after joining the organization, that why did he finally, of course, I met all of them, wonderful people. Later on, we used to call them the Trimurti, because Mao, Adesh, and Vinod, had worked together in C. Dot, and Vinod and Mao and Adesh were from, the Bits Pilani, although different years. But it was so I knew what I was up against. But these are all wonderful people, and we still have a great relationship. But a lot of things comes with the territory. It makes us behave differently in an organization. So one has to be sensitive to that. The other thing he told me was, be careful and remember, understand the politics within every organization, because we may not use the word politics because it's very dirty. But in organizations, people do look out for themselves and their own. So be cautious of that. So these were some of the things that, and when I asked Arun, why did he finally, how did he decide on me? He told me something very interesting. He said, Jayaram, you are the only guy who's worked in the brick and mortar industry, which actually sees ups and downs in their own budget. Like in the tractor industry, some months we budget for good sales, some months we budget for low sales because of weather, rain, etc. He said, in the IT space, most of us have never seen, especially more so in Hughes, we have never seen a down. From 1992 to 2002, we had only grown. It's only around that time when the industry started, so there was a little amount of, people were wondering what's happening. So he said, you bring with you the ability to stabilize things, and that I think was useful. So that was my intake into the company.
Excellent. And tell us about some of the interesting and unheard of stories from HSS. specifically about how you handle the very creative and, shall we say, crafty folks there and all the smart ladies in your group as well. In particular, how was your relationship with Sam? I'm not talking about the surface to air missiles, but no less, Sood, Mao, and Adesh. Are you suggesting that they were as thick as thieves and you had to break into that coterie?
No, no, no. They were not as thick as thieves. Like I used the word earlier, that certain things come with the territory. If people behave the way they do while they're in an organization, it's because that's what the company makes you do. Let me detract slightly, okay? I remember when I was in the advertising industry, one or two of my clients, very big clients, the chairman one day called me and said, "Why don't you join me as VP marketing? Because our VP left 3 months ago. We can't find a good guy. Why don't you join me?" This is a very important story. Now, I was not interested in joining them. And they were already giving me 60% of my business. But these owners of companies, large companies, have very big egos. If I said no to him, it's likely that my business also would go. And then suddenly, it struck me because your ability to survive is all about how you can think on your feet at a critical moment. And this thought came to me. I told him, "Why do you want to have me on your side?" Because I think I'm okay on this side. So he said, "No, you are amongst the few people who tell me things I need to know. All my employees, all my senior people, and we're talking of a Lala, tell me things they think I like knowing. So that's why I want you on my side." Now, he had a very good point. So, but then I told him something. I said, "Listen, sir, I am no different from any of your employees. But the moment I become your employee and you start doing my appraisal, I'm also going to be conscious as to how I rate amongst everybody else. So I'm going to also start telling you things you want to hear. This quality of mine will disappear. It's not that, and they are also like me. It's just that they are employed." He thought for some time and said, "I think you're right, Jayaram. This is what happens when you're in an organization setting." So I think though a lot of those things were, when I look back, no rancor, fun, but the point I'm making, I'm choosing to make this point and take names here is because I'd like a lot of our listeners to know that when you're joining a senior company, be conscious of some of these things. And this is all that comes with the territory. Nothing to be, frustrated about. And these guys, I was just cautious from my side, but these guys were, if you ask me, independently super experienced, super brain power, and collectively they were able to come out with solutions that which saw us through. So I think a lot of it out there was teamwork. But I've just said that any company, it just happens to be these three names, people are aware of them. Any company, you must be conscious of A, the relationships that exist already there, and B, what are the aspirations of each of these individuals for themselves, and are you in any way, subtle way, threatening that because of your own background? I am Harvard, worked here. All these things trigger off danger signals. And I think it was the openness with which all of us worked and Arun Kumar's leadership that enabled us. And there was no blame throwing on anybody as individuals or within the system. I think we collectively came out of the problems. And I think in terms of culture, again, I allude to Aisha. Hughes had a culture very similar to Aisha, quite open and willing to listen and learn.
Excellent. So you talked about Sood, Mao, and Adesh, and you know, uh, predominantly technical, but you also had the non-tech leadership as well. For example, the CFO, Vimal Khanna, was there. How did you develop the relationship with him?
Well, I said something about, my mentor telling me that everybody there will have their own little fears when they find a guy like you coming in, because they will assume certain qualities and capabilities. You may not be that capable as they think you are, but if they think that you are very capable and you could in some way derail some of their, objectives or personal aspirations, then they are going to block you out. So with women specifically, because I had handled finance in two companies in Aisha. So when I went to him, and I'm sharing something which is just in a lighter way, but it is good to know this. So my assessment of that, of not Vimal but of a CFO having a discussion with me to see whether I'm worthy of coming on board or not, in my mind, I'd not even met him before that, but I said, any CFO, what in me will he see as a threat? And I said, the fact that I have been a CEO here, I've been head of corporate marketing, I have been head of finance in 2 companies. Tomorrow, if I were in his place, that's the best way to project and understand how other person would react. That if I were in his place, I would not want somebody in the system who's been a CFO elsewhere, because in the board meeting or elsewhere, because we tend to, always try and do one up on each other, the corporate world. I don't want somebody there tomorrow who may find an error in something number that I should give to the top people and suddenly correct me in the presence of those people. The risk is high with a guy like this. So I said, then such a guy I'd like to keep out of the system if I were in his place. So given that understanding, when I went to walk in to discuss with him, very early I turned the conversation in a way to address those subliminal, because sometimes the fears are subliminal. He may not even have it, but I know that it's there. And how I did it was very simple. I told him, you are a CA, isn't it? He said, yes. I said, I am an MBA here. He said, so? I said, honestly, I find that CAs are so deep and so perfect and so methodical, because in MBA finance, you can see I have been a CFO in 2 companies, but I have struggled because in MBA, we don't even know the left side of the ledger from right side. So debit, credit still I'm struggling with. So, but yes, I got into the job and then moved into something else. But I think if one has to be a CFO, especially for technology company, it is so important that one is a CA, because I don't know if MBA is managing this kind of function. I slipped that in very early, so I knew I had broken his. So again, not personality related, but figuring out what is it that the other person would see you as, and then break that so that that doesn't become an issue in your being said in his saying yes to you. I hope I cut through.
I think it's an invaluable lesson which you are imparting to us when we navigate through the labyrinth of the choked arteries of the corporate world. But I must ask you, when you joined HSS, you joined as the VP Human Resources, and Human Resources was synonymous with Adesh, and you had to fill in his giant shoes. How did you manage that?
You see, Adesh, I think today, because today I read a lot of his LinkedIn posts, etc. He's so clued into this function. You see, I have not been a career, human resource guy, because if you see, I've had a corporate marketing, I've had business development jobs, etc., etc. There's a lot that I learned from Adesh, but I think what helped me was some of the systems and processes that were put in place in HSS. That helped me navigate the process much easily. And then the team that I inherited. So, you ride on the shoulders of great people who work for you. And I have done that always. I've always hired people much smarter than me, because at the end of the day, if I give them the exposure and the learning opportunity and I give them growth, I have no choice but to also grow when they push me up. So I think, I'll give you a very simple example in HSS, which I found extremely fascinating. The hiring manager, which is so, I had never seen that. Maybe it was the norm in technology companies, but like I told you, HSS was my first big technology company. Tality was an interim technology company. The hiring managers in HSS knew everything about the compensation system. They knew everything about fitment. They were able to do a lot of this while dealing with candidates. And so that I think somehow this company had managed to push it down into those guys and train them and expose them. It becomes so easy for an HR guy, because a lot of your work is being done by some of these technology heads. So for anybody who wanted to get into a technology company for the first time in HR, I think HSS should have been the best place. More so because of what Adesh, the legacy he had left behind, the teamwork that was there at the top, but most important, a lot of these HR policies and principles were embedded in the DNA of a lot of our technology people. So it became very easy.
Awesome. I think, and clearly, I think you should invite Adesh for a drink now and have a chat with him, and you'd love it.
The 4 or 5 of us have been, when I was in, see, I shifted to Kochi a year ago, but before that, every 2, 3 months we used to meet, have lunch together. Even now we have our own WhatsApp group. So there's a lot of, things happening there.
Excellent. And curiously enough, you worked at HSS as VP Human Resources for 2 years from 2002 to 2004 when Flextronics acquired HSS. How was your working relationship with the president and the managing director, late Arun Kumar? You alluded to him earlier. Can you now disclose some interesting corporate conversations you had with him during the time of the takeover by Flextronics or later under the ownership of Rupert Murdoch and later acquisition by KKR?
An interesting question. You see, a lot of what I saw happening around in those days, maybe since I was in the eye of the storm, part of that whole thing, I didn't figure out quite a few of these things, but later on in introspection, I figured out what was happening. So these are some of the realities that everybody needs to understand going forward. I'm alluding to our listeners. You see, today, because of acquisition and mergers, you are rarely in control of your own destiny. Because no matter what plans you have for the company as a CEO or as leadership team members, suddenly you find that your owners have chosen to put you in the market. And then you are actually spending time in trying to let the new potential owner know what a great buy you are. So that's one thing I saw in my own career from Aisha days to this, that how one of the biggest changes today is this valuation game. I don't know how many 100-year-old companies are going to exist around us, because most of the owners today, as they say, the first generation builds, the second generation consolidates, the third generation squanders. I'm talking of people who own companies. So in the process of getting better valuation or for some business reason, companies are getting sold. So you get to know these things. And I think our fate was being determined in the US. Put us on the block. Merrill Lynch approached us and told us that, listen, we have been asked to find a buyer for you. And some of these things came as news to us, including Arun. So that's some of the, realities of the way the business does. But I was very close to Arun because maybe in age I was closer to him. So we would discuss a lot of things. And I would also, mind you, write all his speeches, whether he spoke at TIE or wherever it is. I would ask him for what is it that you want me to put in the speech? What do you want to convey? What values you want to share? And Arun was very, very high on values. And for him, personal integrity was very, very high, his own personal integrity. So he would do nothing in order to, affect that. So that's a great learning to work with such people. So were the others, but I think Arun was way above all of us on some of those things. And that's why he was the MD and we were all working with him. But there are a few things I want to share. I don't know, I hope I'm not taking too much time on one single point, but it's very important to understand this. You see, a lot of people, especially the listeners, would be working for organizations where the key decision makers are possibly sitting in some other geography. So one needs to understand what are the data points on which, because the opinions that key people in the organization somewhere in the other geographies, the opinions they have about you, if you're a senior guy in the company, is very critical, because that could result in a situation where you don't know it, but somebody has already formed an opinion about you. The CEO sitting abroad has formed an opinion about you because 3-4 of those senior guys came, met you, said hello to you, and when they go back while playing golf, they may say, but I don't know what that guy is doing out there. So you have to be extremely cautious and conscious of the fact that the data points being used to finally make decisions on you and your career may be beyond what you're delivering today. It could be based on some hearsay talk here or there, because they are all one group. I'll give you a simple example. In 2008, 2009, there was this big meltdown. I've alluded to this in my book. There was this big financial meltdown because of Lehman Brothers and all those things that happened. You recall that, right? I was having lunch with a friend of mine in Dubai who was the MD of a very, very large bank, global bank. And that bank had about 50, 60 MDs in any case all over. And then we were having lunch at the Atlantis, and he was hosting me. And then I asked him, listen, buddy, I hope this financial meltdown is not going to impact your career. Prashant, remember, MD of a very large global bank, and in bonuses alone, he made possibly what all of us made as salary, 5, 6 of us. So he told me something fantastic, a dear friend of mine. So he said, Jayaram, the fact I've become an MD in this bank, my incompetencies have been factored in. So I will not lose my job because of incompetency, being incompetent. But yes, I may lose the job if I can't manage the politics in the company. So I couldn't figure it out. I said, yeah, you're a global bank, global processes, professional, blah, blah, blah. What are the politics? He says, no, it's not politics of trying to kill each other. But let's say I am based in Dubai and I'm managing few countries and few geographies. If another MD whom I don't even know exists, plays golf with our CEO in London because that's where everybody is based. He comes to Dubai on a holiday with his family. And he wonders why our man in Dubai has not come and said hello to me. He may go back and while playing golf tell him, hey, what's the guy? Who's the guy in Dubai? What's he doing? Is he okay? Data points have been created about me. So what I did was I caught hold of the person who was in charge of managing our travel, etc. globally. And I told her, listen, any MD in the bank, if he comes on a holiday to Dubai, let me know where he's staying, give me his numbers. I will go and meet them and I'll take them out for lunch or dinner at the company expense. That will make sure that there is no negative data point about me being created. So, those of us who are working in global organizations today need to be very conscious of this and figure out who are the key people who have the CEO's ear and make sure you don't, you come across well to all of them. This is a reality. People moves.
Sure. So, you know, coming back to Arun Kumar, you said you wrote speeches for him, you played golf with him, you're obviously very close to him. So, from your perspective, how was his view on the haloed personalities of Sood, Mao, and Adesh? Can you disclose some things about how you used to think about these guys?
Well, I don't know where we are going with this, but let me tell you, Arun had terrific respect for them. And uh, I've worked with many, many MDs and CEOs also in my career. Arun had 120% confidence in their competencies to deliver in each of their specific areas. As an engineering head, he felt Sood was par excellence. HR, of course, Adesh. Adesh is very pushy also, but whatever he did, whatever he fought for was always for the organization. Sometimes his pushiness can be a little off-putting, but Arun told me this, that, he's a little aggressive, but on the final analysis, whatever he seeks or whatever he does, I've realized is the right thing that we need to do. And with Mao, Arun was, absolutely gung-ho because this is the man that was bringing business on the table. And I think I remember Arun telling me this once, Jayaram, quarter on quarter, because it's quarter on quarter nonsense that is so critical in those days, no quarter se quarter tak, and the analysts and the market will decide your fate. He said, if I'm able to face the press and the analysts on a quarter on quarter basis, Jayaram, it is this man who makes it possible for me. So I think on this count, he knew he had a great team, and that is the point I want to make. But there's something else I want to share. Because personalities, all of us have our plus and minuses, but we have to look for what are the pluses. I often wondered because I worked in the brick and mortar industry, I worked in the technology space, and I remember during golf, a brick and mortar MD asked me once, Usha fans, he asked me, Jayaram, you worked in both these industries. Why is it that technology companies pamper their employees? And in our companies, we don't. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, I've heard that when you're hiring for a technology company, the questions that the candidate will ask you is, are you 5-day week, 6-day week? 6-day week, not interested. Do you have crash? Okay. Do you have a gym? Can I go to the gym at any time during the day? No, only works. Then not interested. What about food? Is it subsidized? Does the company pay for it? So you guys pamper kids completely. Well, we don't, our employees don't even seek any of those things. Have you ever thought of it, Prashant? I have asked,
Strange.
and then I figured it out. I figured it out as to why technology companies pamper and brick and mortar don't. Took me some time. And I used to actually needle people by asking this question in the brick and mortar side. None of them gave me the correct answer. Then I told them the answer lies in the P&L account, in the profit and loss. Figure out what is employee cost to turnover. In a brick and mortar company like I am in Jindal Stainless Steel, India's #1 stainless steel company, possibly number 3 or 4 in the world, our employee cost to revenues is about 2%. Reliance would be 1.5% with 6 lakh, 8 lakh crores turnover. In a technology company, it is anywhere between 38 to 45, 46%, or even 50%, depending on how many kids you have got out on L1. So the interpretation here is that the key business driver in a brick and mortar company is not necessarily the employee. It could be the way you manage the larger environment, or the way you manage raw material prices, or the way you invest in technology, etc., etc. In technology companies, it is the people. Because if an empty table and chair is actually resulting in loss of contribution margin, because even if you pay 50% cost to employees, you're losing the other 50%. This became this was really an eye opener to me. So I tell youngsters when I talk to them at IIMs and a lot of colleges, and I say, if you plan to make a career, please figure out, are you the key business driver? If you're joining a technology company, you are bound to be a key business driver because company is already spending so much money on you. But if you're joining a brick and mortar company, make sure you join those functions which are critical to the company. If you're not a key business driver, you're very easily dispensable. See, you don't know from where small learnings can come, but this is a very important, eye opener for me.
Excellent. And when Flextronics acquired HSS in 2004, you went on to become the VP Corporate Planning and Communications. Somehow I feel that corporate planning and communications comes more naturally to you than, shall we say, HR. So please tell us whether you yourself instrumented this change of becoming the VP of Corporate Planning and Communications. And once this happened, one way or the other, what changes did you bring about in the way the corporate planning and communications was being handled earlier at Hughes, which was now Flextronics? Mostly because in 2006, KKR acquired HS stroke Flextronics, and acquisitions are critical in corporate communications naturally.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. But the reason for realigning certain positions after Flextronics took us over was that that is the time I think Adesh came back into, they want, BPO was not being given such a big importance as it didn't figure in their scheme of things. And I think we put BPO on the block, and finally it was bought off by somebody. Adesh was the HR stalwart and professional, so rightfully so he came back into HR. So it's a question of finding something meaningful for me to do, and that's where I came into manage this corporate planning and communications. And I remember not many people would know. I was working with a person called Jojo Roy in the US who was doing the marketing, collateral, etc. And we ran a name contest because when we had acquired some 7 companies together, what was known as the Pearl of Strings under Michael Marks's vision. I don't know many people know or even have met Michael Marks, who was the chairman and CEO of MD of Flextronics. Flextronics was a $20 billion company when they acquired us. And more importantly, they were contract manufacturers. They had 100,000 people in China manufacturing, all the HP printers and the Ericsson phones, etc. So it was a brick and mortar company. Contract manufacturing, your margins are in the region of 2 to 4%. And Michael Marks wanted to build a software company because he saw the kind of profitability that was there. So he acquired a lot of these software companies because he told me this, he said, if I can do $1 billion in software, my profitability will be $200 million, 22%. And while I'll make $400 million and 20 billion, so you can see where we are going, Jay. And I remember once after they acquired us, I'm just trying to share some thoughts as they come to me. After he acquired us, he and Arun Kumar, they spoke to our employees. They made the call. We used to go to, I think, Hughes across the road, and then we used to make these video calls, right? He and Arun made the call. I had my people sitting in all the cafeteria, etc., listening into him. And then after he came out, he came to me and said, "Hey, Jay, how did the call go?" A very enthusiastic, energetic person. Huh? I said, "I think it went off well, but the employees are disappointed." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because you did not announce any salary increases." So he used the F letter and said, "What the heck is happening? I just paid so much to acquire this company, and why do they deserve a salary increase?" I said, "No, such a big mind comes from there and talks to us. Obviously, salary increase." He said, "I can't figure you guys out." Mind you, this was the first technology company he was dealing with because he just acquired us. He said, "I can't figure you guys out. In China, if I tell my number two in China that people are facing the East, in a week's time, I want all the employees to face the West. In a week, they'll all be facing the West. Here, I make a suggestion and you guys say, can we discuss it? What's wrong with you guys?" So I had to actually educate him. I told him, the difference is in a brick and mortar company like China, in your facility in China, those people are looking for a job. In our kind of company, people look for a career. And if the company does not provide elements that is going to enable them to further their career, like learning opportunities, growth, and a lot of those things, they'll walk out on you. It took him some time, and then he said, "Jay, I think yes, I write a regular column called to all the employees called View from the Top or something. I want you to write the next one to enable all our employees to know why we need to deal with technology and knowledge workers differently than that." So that was one of the things. But coming back to the point with Jojo, we ran a name contest because when we put 7 companies together, you had to give a new branding. And in the name contest, I actually had this, when I did some Googling, I found out that, what does Accenture mean?
Well, it's supposed to do something with the accent and the curvature. I don't know.
Okay, good try. You see, Accenture was Anderson Consulting. And for a lot of things that happened, rightly or wrongly, they were asked to break up. They had to separate consulting from accounting and audit. So the consulting side, they had a name contest, and one of their employees in Norway gave them this name. It was Accent on the Future, Accenture. So when we threw the name contest to all our employees in the country, including, the people from Lucent in Nuremberg and, Nokia people in Swindon that we had acquired, it was the wife of a German employee, and we were giving a very large TV as the first prize. And she gave the name called Addison because it meant a company on the arise and the ascent. And then I remember the point you made about corporate communications and mergers and acquisitions. When we acquired Lucent's capabilities in Nuremberg and in Bangalore, all of us went there. I was part of the team that did the initial thing. And Arun Kumar addressed those employees, and we were also standing on the stage when Arun said something like, we were something like 46 point something $million. I don't remember the exact number. When one of us corrected him, saying, "No, Arun, it is not that, it is this." And for us, it was another day in the office, right? The way of life to correct each other because we never took umbrage to this. Later on that evening, next day morning, I was having breakfast with the HR head of that Lucent's Europe who was there. And the HR head told me, "What's wrong with you guys?" I said, "Why?" She said, "Germans are strictly hierarchical. They respect hierarchy. You cannot keep countering your top man standing on the platform because then they think that all systems are broken down." Another thing that happened to me, another learning for me was when I had to actually talk to groups of people, talking to them about the the HSS culture versus their culture, what they're getting and what they're not getting. A lot of things. I had to actually do the integration talks. I took them in batches of 20 and 30. When I finished the first speech of mine to about a batch of 20, 30, they were patting the table. Cut, 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 cut. And then I didn't understand what it meant. Later on, I asked the HR person over lunch. She said, oh, in the good old days of, the people who were running this country, there was a lot of rabble rousing and clapping, etc. And so Germans don't like to clap. They will tap the table if they appreciate what you have done. I said, oh, that is an appreciation. So the point I'm making here is it is so important for all of us, especially in today's networked world and working with companies which are you could be working for a division of a large organization. Please understand culturally how different they are from you and be sensitive to that. This was the other thing that I had picked up.
So then why did you quit HSS stroke Flextronics in 2007? Were you simply bored and wanted to do something else? Or was it that, and forgive me for asking this, the new management decided that they wanted someone else and gave hints to you that you have to make way for someone else?
Well, I'll answer that question. Okay. And you will get the answer that you're looking for. But let me tell you, I have written this. This is something I'm trying to come out. I'm trying to touch upon insights that are going to be useful to our people, because I think amongst the listeners today, you got people who are at different stages, and some of them are also CEOs. Some of them are working in companies which may get acquired by another company tomorrow, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to pick up some insights. One of the things I saw in HSS and also in not HSS, FSS, also in companies where I've worked which got acquired. I've written about this in my book. It's one of the chapters. I call it collaborators in the corporate world. You see, in war, when one country walks in and takes over another country, like when Germany walked in and took over France, the elite in France always wanted to preserve their position. And the conquering company doesn't know all the alleys and the softer aspects of which group of people are not with them, who is conniving against them in the country, etc., etc. So the elite, in order to protect their interests, tend to connive with the conquering people and try to tell on their own people. And they are known as collaborators. And it is there in history that France, there were many collaborators who indulged in this kind of a thing. I have seen the same thing happening in the corporate world, including FSS, including another companies where I was when we got acquired. This is, although it's traumatic for the people at the top when an acquisition happens, because till yesterday you were calling the shots and now you've got to give a proposal to somebody else to figure out whether you can do it or not. The bigger thing that subtly happens is the number twos and number threes see this as a great opportunity, some of them, and they collaborate with the conquerors, in this case, the acquiring company key people, and try to build networks with them. And in the process, some people can get derailed also. If you can get the drift of what I'm saying, it's there in the book. So again, this comes with the territory, because there are no permanent friends in the corporate world. We are all acquaintances. Now, coming back to the question, I think, if I remember right, when Tech Mahindra was taken over by Mahindras, they had one set of managers. Then they changed the whole set of them to bring in a new set because things were not happening. I think when an acquisition happens, there's somebody from there, one or two people who are sent to take over, and they want to have their own people, or they're more comfortable with a set of people. And I think it was the time that if you see the way in which the top team of HSS, all of us left. I think Sood left much before, but the rest of us, I think we were all definitely given signals over a period of time. I was definitely given a signal that, it's time to look around. So again, never put your destiny in the company that you work for. Always have your destiny in your control, have a market value, because for no rhyme or reason, tomorrow your company gets acquired. And if you're a senior person, you might be also given a signal. And then because the new guy coming in may think that if I have these key guys there, I will not be able to really take charge because these guys are always going to be there because of legacy. Over a period of time, if you trace the history of companies where acquisitions happen, these things do happen. So it comes with the territory. You got to be prepared for it.
So how are the signals given at the top leadership level? For example, if I have to give a signal to an engineer, I'll talk to him, put him on PIP, and how does it work at the senior leadership level?
Well, what differentiates senior leadership from people down the line is down the line you're very comfortable with concrete. You're told very clearly, this is what you got to do, this is what you got to achieve, this is how you're going to measure your performance, etc. But the higher you go in the company, it's most of it is very ambiguous. So, your ability to deal with ambiguity at the highest levels is a critical competence that you need in order to do well in the company. And it is in that ambiguous environment that you will also be given a signal. Like I remember personally that when increments were given to all the senior guys, I didn't get my increment. So that year, so when I went and met the Flextronics guy who was heading, and it's very embarrassing. How do you ask the question also? And then I think in that very ambiguous talk, I got the message that, I had to look around. And again, I'm saying it with absolutely no rancor, no regret. The reason I'm sharing this here is for people to get to know that these are the realities of working in the corporate world. And I say this to everybody. I speak a lot. I lecture a lot in various companies, various leadership forums, and various management associations. And the one thing I tell people from the corporate world is look at your job as something that is going to sustain your bodily needs, your material needs. Do not think your job will also sustain your soul. If it does, with some great culture and great leaders like we had with Arun Kumar and Aisha, etc., it's a bonus. But life is all about feeling miserable because you had the wrong expectations. So if you treat this as what my job is going to give me, then you will always provide for a fallback for yourself, and your friends, your family, your books, your mentors are the ones who will sustain your soul. Because that track is also equally important, you see. Because whether you like it or not, one day you're going to retire. And today longevity is there, 80, 90 years. So how do you still sustain yourself mentally and don't break down? Having that area also going is so important. So for me, since I worked in brick and mortar companies where we planned for this, we planned for layoffs, we planned for everything, it was just another day in the office when this happened. And I'm sure signals were given later on also. Each of them have to say it, because this is something that happens normally in an organization. And there's nothing to read or nothing to question in greater depth on the subject, because it is a reality. And mind you, everything I'm trying to share here is to just let the target audience know that these are organization realities. Take it in your stride. You will be mentally very strong.
Yeah, that's a little bit comforting, Jayaram. Thanks for being candid. Switching gears, you recently spoke on the leadership insights from sports at the Kerala Management Association. Would you like to share some of the nuggets and insights from there in this forum?
Yes, I think the corporate world, or all of them who are listening to us today, it's so important for them to also get these inputs from me. I've spoken at the Kerala Management Association, spoken at Thrissur Management Association. I address leadership groups all over. What I did in order to make it more relevant, leadership insights, the easiest thing would have been to go to the net and find out what's happening. I spoke to a few friends of mine. I spoke to Murli Karthik, the cricketer, and I used to play golf with him in Delhi. Then I spoke to W.V. Raman. I used to play golf with him in Chennai. I play golf with a lot of the cricketers, but then I spoke to one or two of them I thought who would give me some insights, real insights. Now, Murli told me something very fascinating. He said, Jayaram, very often what happens is the player gets benched for non-performance. You know, in the playing level, a great player may not be included because he has not performed in the last 2, 3 tests. He says, but very rarely does the coach go public with the reason why the player was benched. They will come out by saying that, oh, in the morning of the game, he was indisposed. And, he had a little pain in the heel or something. He says you cannot do greater disservice to that player and to the team by not coming out openly. He says if you have benched a player for being not so inefficient, only then he will know that he has to improve those things. And the rest of the team also knows that if you don't measure up, you can also get benched. He says in the corporate world also, I think we have to be blatantly honest that if somebody is not shaping up, especially at the top, the top 2, 3 levels, it's important to let them know at least why is it that you are sidelining them for the time being from a major project or something else, so that they get the message and the others get the message. I remember, I think it was in the World Cup, recent World Cup, when Portugal was playing against Morocco. The information may be a little wrong, but I'm depending on memory. Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the gods of football other than Messi, was benched after 60, 61 minutes. He was substituted and he threw a tantrum, completely kicked this, kicked that, etc. And the coach didn't like it. He didn't take him for the next match with Switzerland and he made it public. He says, that's not the kind of behavior I will tolerate or something like that. And the next match, they won 6-1 without Ronaldo. So this is the point I learned from Murli Karthik. Learn from sports and practice that in the corporate world. The other important insight I got from W.V. Raman. W.V. Raman was the coach that took the Indian cricket team to the World Cup, Women's World Cup final. They lost. So I asked him, give me some insights. He said, Jayaram, I can give you 2 insights as a coach. He says, what happens is when you are playing, every person brings something to the game in a team. Every person is equally important. That's why you have them in the team. But the senior people the older people who have been together in the team for some time, there's already a coterie existing. So it becomes difficult. I'm sure this is ringing a bell. This becomes difficult for the youngsters to get accepted and fit in very quickly. And the state of mind of being happy, of feeling wanted, of feeling welcomed is very critical if you have to play well on the field. So as a coach, it was my job. And sometimes the new player who has come in may not be a youngster, could be a veteran who's coming back to the team, to help them become part of the team, feel welcomed and feel wanted. As a coach, I have to watch out for these signals and make sure that some of those things don't happen. They have to be wanted. The other interesting message he gave me was, as a coach, Jayaram, it is important for me to be perceived to be equidistant from every player. I may spend more time talking to the captain. I may spend more time talking to a star bowler. But the way I deal with them, I have to deal with them that equidistance, because if I'm not perceived to be equidistant, I'm A, allowing coteries to form, and I'm creating isolation for some of them. Take it back to the corporate world. What is the insight? You see, when we hire youngsters from colleges, we put them through a 1 week, 2 week induction program where all the big wigs come and speak. This is our value, this is our mission, vision, etc. We invest time in inducting youngsters. But do companies ever invest time in inducting senior folks into the company? When we join a company, because I'm sure many people change jobs, when you join a company, what are the signals that when you join a company you're looking for? You're looking for what are the acceptable behaviors in this company which will help me grow. And nobody tells you what they accept. So you've been thrown to the deep end of the pool and you're trying to figure out. I personally do this with some of the companies where I consult. When we hire a senior person, after 2 months, I take them for lunch and I ask them, have you understood, figure out the dynamics here? Have you figured out who's where, what is the coterie, what matters, what behavior is acceptable? And then I tell them, watch out for these two because they're very close to the top guy. Here, and this is the behavior that's acceptable. And I have wherever I've given this kind of inputs, all guys after 1 year, when I talk to the owners, they say this guy's fitting in so well. And where they have a track record of that guy's 3 predecessors not fitting in and dismissed off as saying, oh, cultural misfit. So if you are hiring senior people in your company and you are the CEO, try and help these fellow people break into the organization by having one of the other people, not you, because you are their evaluator. Tell them clearly as to what works and what doesn't work in the company. You must be perceived to be equidistant from all your reportees and make everyone feel wanted. So that was the W.V. Raman. You see, what an insight from a sports person, so relevant for the corporate world.
Absolutely. And that was, very educational as well. It could be considered a masterclass. But laying this, theoretical concepts which you laid out, of course, they have practical significance, but laying them on the more contemporary corporate behavior, what are your thoughts on the recent furor created by L&T chairman S.N. Subramanian with his remarks about working for 90 hours a week, not to mention his comments about how long folks can stare at their spouse on a weekend?
Um, Prashant, it is so fashionable to criticize nowadays. And, we criticize everybody without even knowing the context of what was said when it was said. Because we have this weapon called social media. I have
Hang on, are
said,
you supporting him? Are you supporting him?
I'm not supporting him. I said, without knowing the context, we tend to pass opinions, right? Now, I always, I say that social media today, everybody seems to be going haywire on social media. I mean, look at the kind of Instagrams and, the AI generated falsehoods that are there. So social media, one has to take very carefully. Now, coming to what he said, I wasn't physically present when he said it. And how often don't we also in our own private groups, we shed our own opinions, correct? But I think to have said it in a public forum, knowing very well that when a top guy talks, even his opinion becomes company policy. I've always believed this when I became CEO, etc., that I had to be extra careful that I couldn't even joke around on something because finally, when it reached the employees through the Chinese whisper, it may become company policy or something else. So I think what he said about staring at his wife, etc., if he said it, I think it was said in a jocular manner. But yes, the fact he said it in that forum is truly bad bedside manners, as I would call it, which I heard in the FSS context. If you listen to what Mr. Narayan Murthy said and what he said, because he is he's in the infrastructure business, and I posted a LinkedIn post on this. I said he was talking to his employees, and they are all in the infrastructure business. Infrastructure has serious deadlines by which things have to be done. And in my LinkedIn post, I did write that look at the oil drilling and exploration business. You are 1 week off, 1 week on. You don't work 8 hours because the job itself needs, you cannot take a break and stop the pumping of the oil. Narayan Murthy said this when he said that if we need to grow as a nation, then we need to put in more hours. He also alluded to, if I remember right, if we're reading right, he said China, the way they work 90 hours while the US works X number of hours, China has managed to, in infrastructure, explode. So I think he was talking of infrastructure. And look at me, when I work, I have seen this in HSS2, boss, when there were projects, guys would be in the office for 2-3 days. They never turned around and said my work-life balance is being impacted. In advertising, if a film had to be made, people work and then go to the studio 14 hours, you're doing the editing. I think if you're passionate about something, you will manage to find a balance between everything. So I leave my opinion there because, post COVID, this work from home has its positives and its negatives. And now things are slowly leveling off because I am a very big, uh, you know, uh, I'm in favor of organization culture because the culture makes a difference between one company and the other. You agree with me?
Yeah.
But if there are employees who joined your company From day one, they have been working from home. When will they ever experience the culture of the company? When will they ever experience why our company is better than the others? So I think organizations have also realized it. Some of them are insisting you must come for 3 days or 4 days. So this is a territory where I don't want to walk into, because there's a poem by a person called Oliver Goldsmith. I think this is a very apt response to the question. Oliver Goldsmith, in his poem called The Deserted Village, he says, I remember one or two lines, he says, when emotion sets in, reason flees. And I followed that. If I've gotten into an argument with somebody and the other person got emotional, I would get out of the discussion for the time being, because the moment emotion has set in, logic has fled. To talk on the subject, especially to the current generation, is you cannot have a reasonable conversation, because even to tell them he meant it in context of infrastructure, he meant it in context of nation building, he meant it in context of competing with China, those things, when people get emotional, logic is gone. So I think this is a debate that will continue, and each one will bring their own perspective to it, the way they want to see it.
So thanks for that, Jayaram. And you mentioned a very interesting term, bad bedside manners. Seems like a corporate speak, a new one to me. So let me ask you, in a lighter vein, how are the bedside manners of the top leadership of HSS?
Well, it's not bedside manners as bedside manners per se, okay? It's about, I'll give you one example from HSS. I remember Arun Kumar called me up early morning at home, and he said, have you seen your mail? I said, no, boss. He said, start looking for a job and find one for me too. So I said, what happened, Arun? He said, yeah, mail to padi yaar. So I read the mail, and it was, we train, rightly so, we train our employees, and we had this thing called direct line, right? So if anybody saw, and this is brilliant in our kind of companies, if anybody saw something which was happening, which was against the values of the company, etc., you could send it to direct line. It would go to Arun Kumar. He would have a look at it, and then they would take action. You recall this, right? Direct line. So, but when there was a small time of period when Rupert Murdoch's company was in the process of acquiring us, which fell through, and then it went to KKR. But in those days, direct line went to, I think, must have gone to a very senior guy in Rupert Murdoch, or went to Rupert Murdoch, because that's the IT did it. And there was a young lady in our company who sent a mail on direct line saying, I don't know the exact words, but she said, that I am being sexually harassed. Please do something about it. So Rupert sent it to his number 2 and said, please look into it, because in multinational companies, if this thing explodes, it creates chaos all over the company. So it was sent, it came down the hierarchy, and then it came to Arun. Arun came to me. I passed it on. And I passed it on to one of my HR heads. And I told her, listen, while I'm looking for a job and Arun's looking for a job, you will also start looking for a job if you don't solve this thing immediately. So within about 3 hours, she called me back and said, have you seen your mail? I said, no. She says, problem resolved. I said, what happened? She said, this girl, we were sitting in this half cabins, half cube. So you could see each other. So she had said that there is this guy who sits across the other side and keeps staring at me. So I feel sexually harassed or something to that extent, because we've given this kind of training, like in the sexual harassment lectures that we give. If somebody cracks a joke which is in the room and you are there and it is not meant for you, but you overhear it, it's sexual harassment. A lot of those things are so true. And so she called the guy into the room with, of course, she had a witness there, and he said, "Listen, I don't even know she exists. I am, thinking of my own problems, technology problems." She asked the girl, apparently, if I make this guy sit the other way and look at the wall, she says, "Yeah, then I'm not being sexually harassed." To that extent, okay. And that change was made. That lady sent the mail back saying it's sorted out. Then the mail went up the hierarchy. And then Rupert's number 2 apparently sent it to Rupert saying, oh, it's nothing much. It's just a case of bad bedside habits, manners. And then the same thing came back to us. And that is where I learned this term, bedside manners. So you can see the context. But man, It actually sent shivers down my spine when I got to look for a job or something like this. But this is the realities of the world, corporate world, and more so today when everybody is figure happy.
Excellent, excellent. Well, how did you get the idea of writing this book, Inside C-Suite? I've personally read it, and the delightful stories over there with a lot of insights. And it's such a pleasure reading it. I recommend it to all the viewers out here. And while you are at it, please tell our viewers who may not have read the book yet what it is all about, and is there a sequel to this book anytime soon in the offing?
Okay, this book, as you said in the initial part of this conversation, is called Inside the C-Suite. And C-Suite actually refers to the suite where the C-level people sit. The CEO, CTO, CIO, CFO, CEO, all those people. That's a C-suite. I may not have too many sharp qualities as some of my colleagues in Hughes and other places, but one thing that works in my head is my memory. So I can tell relevant stories and tell relevant jokes to the situation. So a lot of my friends told me, yeah, since you're so good at this, you can pull out things from your mind. Why don't you write? And so I decided. So I learned writing because everybody wants to be a writer. Everybody writes. But this is a little advice. When you want to write, first join a writing program. So I joined a creative writing program in the US. I used to sit late at night and 30 of us would be given a topic by the teacher. We would write on it and then one of our things will be discussed. And I remember if I write something and send it to you or to my brother or to a friend, they'll say, yeah, Jayaram, looks nice. Because even if you think it is crap, you're bound to say it looks nice because that's the way we relate. But in that particular forum, the kind of comments I heard shook me up. But then that also strengthened me, made me more steely. They would ask, hey, Jay, what are you smoking? Where is the story going? How can a coincidence resolve a conflict? A coincidence can cause a conflict, but coincidence can never resolve a conflict. This is the truth in story writing. And I started writing, and then I decided to write, and the rest is history. Managed to get the connections. And the book, the theme of the book, like every movie has a theme, like the theme of Cinderella, and this theme is never stated. The theme, if you look at Netflix, there's a log line saying Prashant was an ex CIA person, had retired, but suddenly his past caught up with him and he had to get back into the crime world. So that will tell you what the story is about, the log line. But the theme is never told. And the theme actually is, let's say, Cinderella. The theme of Cinderella is goodness will always prevail. So there are themes like this, that in some it will be that, being dishonest, you will never survive. Good always prevails. So these are themes. Go into the net and read what are the themes of various Hollywood movies you've seen. So I learned this writing course and then I wrote the book. And the theme of my book really is this. As I grew in the corporate world, I realized what I thought of the senior guys when I was a junior was very different from what the senior guys were actually all about. Getting it? So I realized that the higher you go in the corporate world, the more insecure you are. Because the reasons why you could lose your job has nothing to do with competence. It could mean that somewhere you hurt the ego of the top guy. The brick and mortar guys will understand what I'm saying. In the technology companies which are acquired and where the people who decide on you sit across geographies, also these things can happen. So it's the small things you need to care about. And so the insecurity is much higher. And the other reason why the insecurity is higher at top levels is this, Prashant. Today, at the higher levels, you're paid fancy salaries. The surplus that you have every year is huge. Throw in some ESOPs. What do you do with the surplus? You, in India specifically, you buy 3 more properties for which you keep paying the EMIs. If you lose your job for some reason, your worry is, how will I pay those EMIs? Your worry is, my standard of living is the bare minimum required for survival. So this insecurity shows up in many ways on the job. So there is an English saying, quote saying that you never fight a crocodile in water, correct? I think the crocodiles in the water are us senior folks. And this book teaches youngsters how to fight these crocodiles in the water, how to figure out their insecurities, how to figure out their inadequacies, and how to not do things that creates tension in their mind because of which they'll get after you. So these are all based on 21 true episodes. They're actually true episodes. But then, since I learned story writing, I created a protagonist, an antagonist, and a conflict and a resolution. That's how the story unfolds. And let me tell you, my teacher in my creative class told us, if you want to write, first read. She said, write by writing short stories. Start by writing short stories. And she said, read at least 250 short stories. I read about 350 of them before and they are all available. Hemingway, Maupassant, Prem Chand, Tagore. I read all of them to get, and there is a pattern in storytelling. It doesn't end there. This is what I told you, you need to find something else to sustain your soul. In 2019, I think I went to London to attend a script writing course. Listen very carefully. It was a 3-day course by a gentleman called Robert McKee. Robert MCKEE. People can Google him. That time he was, I think, 78 years old. Today is 84. He does these 4 or 5 seminars all over the world. He is one of the biggest names in Hollywood, where all the studios send their script to him for finally vetting it. In the last 35 years, 70 of his students have won Oscar awards. And after I write my next book, which is a sequel to Inside the C-Suite, but this will be more hard-hitting. I'm going to be more direct. And so I will also write the insight at the end of each of my episodes. So that book is due in the next 6 months. Then, because that is to let people know what the real corporate world is. There is good and not so good in the corporate. Like, why don't we talk about these things? And then I'm going to write scripts, because in Kerala, content is king. And I've already made friends with many studio heads and other people. And that's where I'm going. But there's one more question. In our informal talks, you had asked me, what advice would you give youngsters? Right?
Yes.
So I am no one to advise youngsters, because I have to just apply my mind to my own son and see, does he take advice from me? Never. But let me, since we are talking and this is the podcast, let me try and share what worked for me and what did not work for me as an advice. I think one thing that helped me was I was a voracious reader right from my young days. And I think my father was so strict that I took refuge in my books. And there was no TV, there was no YouTube in those days when I was studying. So I think lack of distractions also forced me to read. But that has stood me extremely good stead. Read things like The Economist, increase your worldview, because as you grow in organizations, you'll be part of forums where some discussion will happen, formal, informal. If you're seen somebody who can contribute, you're already seen as somebody who's little above the others. And be curious. The other thing is important to build your own personal brand. It's big talk, personal brand, but if you break it down to its elements, personal brand is nothing but I say what I mean and mean what I say. If we can do this as we grow and evolve, you will have a great personal branding and you will be picked up for key assignments wherever you are. The other important thing I've realized, what differentiates, these people who are picked up for key assignments or people whose voice is heard more than the others, is have a reputation of somebody who will say, I don't know, if you're asked a question by your boss's boss's boss in a major meeting. There's no harm in saying, I don't know. Say, I'll find out and let you know. So have this branding of being known as somebody who will always deal with facts. Today, only opinions are thrown around. Be known as somebody who deal with facts, and then tell the person concerned, this is the fact of why this happened. If you want my opinion, I'll share with you. So if you have this differentiation that Prashant is somebody you want to know what happened, talk to Prashant because he will give you the facts. I'm telling you, is worth its weight in gold, this kind of reputation. And the most important thing, we all have this need for power in organizations. I was part of a three-man team that participated in 86 in the Young Managers Contest, which was, All India Management Association and Business India. Our Aishar team stood first in Northern region and we stood first All India. But part of that exercise was to also interview CEOs and C-level people on three things, authority, contribution, and effectiveness, and things like that. So I remember whenever we spoke to CEOs and interviewed them, and I used to ask them, if I use the word authority, what comes to your mind? They would say, authority is all about catching people do things when they do wrong. My authority comes from my designation. My authority comes from the number of people who work for me. My authority comes in the kind of business and projects that I handle. One guy, Mr. Mathur, who was then the chairman of International Airport Authorities, he told us, I was the materials director at Maruti. And it was a big company even then. He says, I later on realized I had no powers to sign because many people see their authority, signing authority. Your ability to hire and fire is all your power comes from there. He said, the government of India rules were such that I had a certain amount of money, purchase order signing authority. Even if I ordered wheel rims for the whole year, it went outside my limit. So it always had to go to the CMD. So I was very frustrated thinking that I have no power. Till one day, the CMD secretary sent a folder to me saying, the CMD wants you to read it and initial this before he signs it. And it was a contract, multi-crore contract, which was going abroad. I read it, I signed it. I realized over a period of time, the CMD would always ask, has Mathur initialed it? That initial of mine was worth its worth in gold because if I initial means I had to read the whole thing. I couldn't irresponsibly sign. Then I realized that day that it was my competence that gave me the true authority in the company. And then I have spoken at various levels saying that if you make your competence your true source of power, you will always win. So take away all the other trappings, what we consider as power, and focus on your competence from a very young age when you enter the corporate world. It's again a very interesting and deep insight and very counterintuitive.
Yeah, thanks for that wonderful advice to all the young students and the corporate professionals who are young. But I must ask you this. What is keeping you content and happy these days? Please tell us a little bit about your hobbies, passions, and perhaps some glimpses into your personal life, including the sport of golf, which I dare say is worthy of being called your mistress, isn't it?
Yes, my wife for quite some time was a golf widow. The reason I started playing golf because golf is an expensive game. So I picked it up when I was 49, 50 at the DLF golf course in Gurgaon, which is the finest course in India. And the beauty with golf is you don't need to pulverize somebody else to win. Boxing, you got to thrash somebody else. Tennis, you got to beat somebody else. Golf is one of those few games to my memory where you are only trying to improve what you did the previous day. Because if I did the course in 80 strokes today, tomorrow if I do it in 79, I consider it. And then golf, when you go there early morning, I'm telling you, I used to often start with this thought that there are 1.3 billion people in the country. This is the best golf course in this part of the world. And I am playing here. I'm seeing the eagle dive for a fish. And I would give a small prayer to God, and that was gratitude. So coming back to the earlier question, what keeps me going? I think if all of us inculcate gratitude for what we have. I may not be as rich as an Ambani, but I have got more than what I need. So I have seriously started inculcating gratitude for myself over the last many years. And that is what makes me stop comparing or suffer by comparison when it comes to material wealth, etc., etc. So you have to internalize it. So to me, that is important. I speak a lot. I'm on the board of two companies, fortunately. I'm writing my next book. I'm already working very, very hard on should I write a book which gets converted into a film script or should I start by writing a film script? These are all. So my brain, I work very hard to keep my. Is it easy to keep your body in shape? But how do you keep your brain in shape and push Alzheimer's away as far as possible? I think by doing these things. So a lot of our listeners today should start doing these things so that they also keep Alzheimer's away. So I'm very happy with, and I think it's the gratitude for what I have, which keeps me extremely happy, because suffering by comparison, then there is no place in the system.
Gratitude is all we have, all our viewers included, towards you, and it's been a privilege talking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been in conversation with the experienced corporate professional, acclaimed author, speaker, management consultant, and above all, a man with a heart of gold, Jayaram Easwaran.
And last word from me, Prashant. Although I have tried to, because there was no point in pussyfooting around and trying to make this, what do they call it? Just another talk. And you, did grill me, took a few names, etc. So I would like to once again say, whatever I've said is malice towards no one. It is just the reality. And the purpose of this talk, as I started right in the beginning, was share my experiences and cull out insights from that. And if that is useful to our viewers and listeners, then this is time well spent. And thank you very much, Prashant, once again for having me on this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jayaram.